Welcome back to Fast RC, buddy. My name is Ryan, and in today's video, we're going to talk about 3D printing custom parts for your RC vehicle. So stick around, and I'll see you on the other side of the intro. Alright, so I've been waiting to make this video for like 5 weeks now, and now we're finally here. I'm ready to make it and get this video out and talk about 3D printing stuff for your RC vehicles. And so what this video is going to cover today, number one, first we're going to talk about the 3D printer that I'm using at the moment. It's actually my very first 3D printer. I'll go over all the details of that, how I use it, which programs I use, all that kind of stuff. Then number two, we're going to talk about some of the parts that I made. Parts for the Stampede 4x4, parts for the Slash 4x4, some other auxiliary parts, and even some tools that I've made. And then after that, we'll do some final thoughts, talk about what I like about 3D printing, what skills you need to work on, what you need to know before you get into 3D printing and all that stuff. So stick around. This is going to be a longer video than normal and a little bit different setup since I'm not doing a lot of the talking head style type video in this one. But stick around. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, please like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you think. And without further ado, let's go ahead and go off to my garage. All right, welcome to Fast RC headquarters, aka my garage. And so the first thing I want to talk about here is the 3D printer. So let's go ahead and flip around and talk about that. All right, so I had to reposition my camera here a little bit, but let's first talk about the 3D printer, and it's kind of the basis of this entire video, really. And you can see I just turned it on, so it made some sounds. But just to introduce this printer, if you haven't seen this thing already, I've seen actually a few YouTube RC channels already do a video on this specific printer. But this is a Bambu Lab A1 printer. This is the full-size A1, so it's got the 256 millimeter by 256 millimeter bed, so it's basically 10 by 10 inches. I've bought this printer in November around just before Black Friday. Got it in December, so last month, so I've had it a little over a month. And I have print a ton of stuff. Just take a look at my poop bin here, and you can see I've already printed a bunch of crap with supports. And I'm going to talk about some of that crap that I printed here in this video. It's the whole point of the video. But all I'm going to say about this printer, fantastic printer for the money. I got it in Black Friday for $2.99. I did not buy the AMS combo, which is the multicolor attachment. And I sorely regret it. So if you are considering this printer, I highly recommend you get the AMS Lite combo with it. Actually saves you about $100 if you get the combo. Just bite the bullet, get the AMS with it. Don't make the same mistake that I did. I don't have the AMS, so you can see here, I'm constantly swapping out my filament sets depending on what I'm printing. So it's not the end of the world. Like if you just get the printer, you could do like what I'm doing, just do single colors, which is totally fine. But it's awesome. And if you just kind of go through all the different stuff that I've printed, you can see all the different files. Some of this stuff is stuff that I actually made myself in Blender or FreeCAD. But you can roll through it, and there's just tons of stuff that you can make. There's tools, there's different boxes and, benchies and stuff like that. Highly recommend it. You can actually see here I got a dust guard on it, which also is printed. Machine's not on right now, but not actively working, but highly recommend it. And then of course, if you do buy one of these machines, you're gonna have to buy some filament, which I'll roll over to my cabinet here. I already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I got another roll of filament on the machine. So I got 6 rolls of filament. So I don't know, they run about 20, 25 bucks depending on what you buy. So I'm in it, a little over $100, but not too bad. So let's go ahead and roll over and start talking about actual parts and RC stuff. So roll over to the other side of Fast RC headquarters. And I got this project on the bench right now. This is what I've been working on this last week. And this is a good one. This is an old project. If you've been subscribed to my channel for a while, if you go back into my video archive and take a look, this is a Stampede 4x4. It might not be very recognizable, but if I throw the body on it, let's go ahead and fix that real quick. You can see I'm like mid-project right now. I'm like right in the middle of tweaking this thing. But there we go. So Stampede 4x4. When I actually bought this as a roller, it was technically a Traxxas Haas, but now we know they discontinued the Haas, and this is actually a Stampede 4x4. But I'll be honest, this is one sick looking rig. It's been one of my favorite projects. I finished this last year, and now it's no longer finished, and I'm back working on it again. Let's slide over some of the 3D printed stuff. So let's just start with this project. This thing was intended to be a trail slash crawling rig, and I know it's a basher, but I'm trying to convert it to be an actual crawler. This week, I actually threw some Sedonas on it. That's a topic for another video, another day, but let's go ahead and take it off. And let's talk about some of the 3D printed stuff. So just last night, while working on this project, I'm switching over to a different motor setup. So I'm actually gonna pull this motor out of there. I have an old Tekin setup with a Tekin RS Pro and then a Tekin Rock 412 motor. And then with that RS Pro ESC, I also have a Castle Pro BEC, which is, I know, super old school nowadays. But because I have it and I don't have to pay for it, I'm gonna go ahead and install that setup. So it's really old school. I do need a BEC for this high-tech servo. It's on my prior setup with this Spectrum receiver. It was causing some brownout issues. So I got to install a BEC with this Tekin ESC that I got. And so I created or 3D printed this mounting bracket. So this looks very familiar for Traxxas vehicles. They sell like these adapter plates like at the hobby stores where you can double side tape any type of ESC you want in a Traxxas vehicle. In my case, they don't make anything like this. So you can see it's a ESC plate, and then it's got a vertical plate that goes up about 45 millimeters. And so the point of this is that I'd be able to double side tape the ESC on one side and then double side tape the BEC on the other side. So it kind of gives you a little bit more mounting options inside of this rig. So I just made this last night, and I would say it took me, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes in Blender to just quickly like build this up in Blender and then get it ready for print. You can see I actually made a mistake. If you look close enough, where the antenna post is supposed to go, I didn't actually account for that in Blender, so I had to actually cut it off with a razor blade. But I'll go back in Blender and fix it. But all I had to do was take the measurements from the hole. So hole, which I believe was like, if I remember right, it was like 30, or I don't know, it was like maybe 40 millimeters across or something like that. Took accurate measurements using my 3D printed caliper that I also, since I don't have a caliper here, I'm gonna buy one eventually, but I 3D printed one. Took my measurements, got pretty close. Basically got the measurements of the plate itself. Of course, I didn't account for that. Measurement of the bolt hole patterns. And then I just kind of eyeballed it in Blender. I was like, maybe 45-ish to 50 millimeters should be enough. And looking at my ESC and BEC, it's actually going to work out perfect. So 3D printed part, this is regular PLA. It's pretty tough. I won't say, like, if it does take like a direct impact, it'll probably snap, but I'm not intending on this taking impact. And I did strengthen the build a little bit. So instead of a standard 2-layer wall 3D print, I went 4 layers on this one. So it does have like a little bit of heft to it. Not bad overall, but that's kind of a really like functional part that you could quickly throw together in Blender in like 15 minutes. And then this is pure aesthetics. So I've been like on this kick where I want to add exhaust features to all my trucks. And so the Stampede 4x4, I went ahead and created an exhaust pipe. Let me show you. So there's that. So it's kind of like some faux exhaust pipes. And all I did was I just made myself a bracket in Blender that goes off where you would, there were some bolt holes here where I think for like the sway bar. See if we can get back there. Actually, yeah, it kind of goes around where the sway bar would be if this truck did have a sway bar. So I just made a little bracket, little T bracket. And then I made another flat bracket up here. Sorry, I put the camera in the way. Flat bracket. And then down here, there's some screws that runs through the exhaust tip right there. So you can kind of see it on the back. This is a super simple print. And if I remember right, this was, all of these parts together was somewhere, I think it was like 11 or 12 grams of filament, which is like stupid cheap. Like that, we're talking like less than $1. I'll throw the math up on the screen. Super cheap. And here's how it looks with the body. Just kind of throw the body on it real quick. And let's get close to it. The body posts never line up really great on this thing. Especially, there we go, got it. Especially trying to do it with one hand. So let's go and slide that around. And you kind of get the gist of what I'm going for. So we have some faux exhaust pipes underneath it now. I don't know why. I'm just on this kick of like pro scale look. and exhaust pipes I think look cool, especially on the back of a truck like this. So yeah, there's that. Let's go through some other parts that I 3D printed. So like I talked about a minute ago, I did not 3D print MIP part. But I did 3D print this caliper set. This is super basic, but it actually does a decent job of, if you don't have a caliper set already, you can 3D print your own. I want to say it's maybe like 30 grams or 40 grams of filament. So it's like $1, a little over $1 to print this. Not bad. I needed a protractor for the project I'm going to show you on next on my Slash 4x4. Made some exhaust pipes. I needed a way to measure degrees from center on from one bolt hole to another. So I went ahead and printed myself protractor. This thing was like, I don't know, it was probably like 20 cents to print this. Stupid cheap. This was like a faux rock pile set that I built. I'm going to be doing some scale crawler stuff here in the future, and I had some 3D files from a video game I was making in the past, and I was like, let me see if I can actually print this stuff. So I threw the file into Blender, exported it as an STL, and sure enough, you can print 3D rocks. And I have tons of files for that kind of stuff too. So that's going to be kind of cool in the future. And then some other stuff that I built. Let's kind of just calm the camera down here a little bit. And I think you might laugh at like what I'm using to actually like hold my camera. It's kind of, I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually using a Traxxas transmitter to hold this thing. Okay, so this, actually I'm gonna talk about this in a second because that goes for the Slash 4x4, the Intimidator project. This was like a ram air hood. This was my very first part that I made in Blender. I was just like screwing around and trying to make like a ram air hood or like something that would kind of like resemble a hood. And I didn't specifically make it for my Stamp or my Slash 4x4 Intimidator, but the idea was if you had a car like this, you could actually mount it down on the hood, drill a couple holes, or remount a couple holes, and then you can use body clips. So I'm not going to do it on this truck, but in theory, it does work. It was the very first part that I made in Blender, and it probably took me way longer than it should have. It was like an hour. If I was to do this now, it'd be a lot faster. Second parts that I made. So this actually is all about the Slash. So let's go ahead and get this Stampede out of here. Sorry, guys. I know this is a different kind of video, but there wasn't really like a good way for me to show you guys all this stuff. I don't have a good camera set up in the garage yet. Okay, another familiar project, Slash 4x4 Intimidator. This is one of my favorite. This is a total shelf queen right now, and I'll tell you, because if I take off the body and set this aside real quick, there are no electronics in this thing right now. So I think I mentioned this in one of my videos before that like, I'm so happy with how this truck turned out that I actually don't drive it. Like I'm afraid to drive it. It was a complete rebuild. Had all new electronics. The only thing in there right now is a servo. Took everything else out. So, but I did 3D print some parts for this. So let's start off with the most obvious thing, the exhaust. So I'll throw up a picture of the exhaust so you can see it, or actually I'll just throw the body on here in a second. But this was the first set of custom exhausts that I made. And actually, these are the first ones that I made. And you can see how they kind of lined up. I mismeasured the holes, so the holes didn't line up. And then the pipes were a little bit too short. So I made the second revision here where I got the angle correct and I got the distance from the screw hole to screw hole correct. And then I extended the pipes a little bit so they stick out and you can actually see them. Like I said, I'm like super big on pro scale look right now for bashers, and that's kind of my iteration of doing this. I made this in like 30 minutes in Blender. So if there's one moral of the story out of this video is like, if you do get a 3D printer, just dive in, download Blender. Blender is free. It's a 3D software. Just Google Blender, you'll find it. Super easy. And there's a learning curve, but you can make anything. So, all right, the next part that I made in Blender was this ram air hood vent looking thing. And the reason why I made this, because the one time I actually did run this vehicle, the motor temp got pretty hot because of this dust cover that I got. And one thing with the Slash 4x4, like in my last video, that I don't like is the sheer amount of debris that gets in the chassis. So when I first did this project, I really wanted to have this cover. And so I did it, and I love the way it looks, but it absolutely will heat up your electronics. So what I did in Blender was I designed this little ram air intake, and it's actually got a removable dust cover. So you can actually change the way this looks. And I added some divots so that it'll actually clamp on, and you just really just push it on like that. And it's tight on there, pretty tight. It's got a 20mm hole. And my idea was that I was going to ream out a hole right here on the top of this cover and actually just mount that guy right there. And so and then here's the back bracket, which you would have the screw run through, and then you'd use like a nut and a washer to secure it to this dust cover. This part, if you were to hold this in your hand, if you're not familiar with 3D printing, this was very little plastic. I want to say like maybe like 13 grams altogether, or like 15 grams, which is very light. This thing it weighs like nothing. It is not going to affect this vehicle anyway as far as weight. It's super light. But one of the reasons why I designed it this way, and I kind of moved the snorkel forward, was that because of the way this slash 4x4 is designed, from the tires, like these tires, as it's rolling, will kick all that debris up into the body and then right down into the chassis, which this protector will stop. But I don't want debris going in through the snorkel, so I kind of moved it forward like that, so that way the air would pass through like the shock tower. And usually the air coming through the shock tower, like around here, is going to, in general, be pretty clean. Plus, you got the grill on it to keep any big particles out. I feel like this will help bring in some airflow into the chassis without exposing it to all the debris coming off the tires. So I got to install this one still, but if I ever do run this thing, I'm absolutely going to install this ram air hood vent. It's going to look kind of funky, but it'll be functional. So there's that. We talked about the exhaust. Let me show you guys real quick. Let me get the body. This is going to be kind of a long video too. Like, we're already 15 minutes in, more than that. Okay, so here we are, we're back slash 4x4, and then you can kind of get an idea now. Like, there you go, some nice exhaust pipes right out the back. I don't know, I love that. I like pro scale look. I like bashers that are capable bashers, but also have like scale features to them, which is the whole point of this truck, with like the Intimidator logos, the TRX4 side mirrors. Like, it's kind of it's a pro scale look. Kind of, I guess the best comp, when I made this, like the best comp would be like the Traxxas Raptor R. That's like a pro scale build. It's basically a short course truck with a lot of scale features. And that's what this was. And I always just felt like you needed to have some exhaust pipes on it. I got the bumper sticker, I got the emblems, like missing the exhaust pipes, and now I got them. This like super reminds me of my Monte Carlo Intimidator. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. These were just some exhaust pipe extenders from the exhaust pipes for the Stampede. I ended up not needing them. But that was pretty much it for that. So let's go ahead and get to the final thoughts. All right, here we are for final thoughts. So that's a little bit long video there in my garage, but definitely touched on a lot of topics. And the first thing I want to talk about here in my final thoughts is just 3D printing in general and the RC hobby. I really feel like being in the RC hobby as long as I have, and I know a lot of you guys watching this video have probably been in the hobby for years, if not decades. I really feel like 3D printing is like the next logical step in this hobby. I don't think it's required. You don't have to get into 3D printing if you're in this hobby, but if you're into modding your own vehicles, especially if you're in the scale trailing rigs, scale crawlers, things like that, 3D printing is even more relevant. There's tons of other big channels that talk about 3D printing and make their own stuff. I know with my channel, I'm a little bit more oriented towards the basher realm of things and Stampedes and slashes and eventually getting some Arma stuff. But I still enjoy making parts and scale parts like you saw with my exhaust pipes and things like that, or even functional parts like the ESC tray or the ram air hood vent for the dust cover. I enjoy making that kind of stuff, and I always felt that 3D printing was very relevant. Now, if you're going to go pick a 3D printer, definitely do your research. I did a couple months at least of research before I finally decided to buy the Bambu Lab A1. There's tons of, there's tons of printers out there. There's some really good ones. There's some that aren't so good. I'll say for myself, the Bambu Lab A1, I'm very, very happy with it. I actually haven't had, I think I maybe had one failed print, but the print didn't actually fail during the job. It just, for whatever reason, after it was done printing, the part like snapped in half. So sometimes that stuff happens, but honestly, the reliability, you could pretty much set this thing, and I don't recommend you walk away, but you can have a fairly reasonable amount of confidence that it's going to complete the job. And that is something that really scared me about 3D printing, for being honest, is just how reliable are these machines? How much of a pain in the butt are they to get up and running? All of those are concerning. I will tell you, the Bambu Lab A1, so far, the month and a half I've had it, has been extremely reliable. But here's the other thing that I really want to talk about with 3D printing and RC. When you get a 3D printer like the Bambu Lab or a Creality or whichever other brand, Prusa, you'll get in, you can go to some websites, you can download some STL files, you can print out gadgets and gizmos and different trinkets and things like that. But to me, where the real power of 3D printing at is being able to make your own stuff. And I told myself before I bought the printer, I was like, I will not buy this printer if I do not intend on making my own stuff. Whether you make it in Blender like I do, or if you use a CAD system like FreeCAD or Fusion Pro, which is very expensive. I would love to have Fusion Pro, but it's expensive. Either way, if you get a CAD software, that's, in my opinion, where the real power of 3D printing is at. Now, I'm a total noob to this, so like I'm just using Blender. I'm like eyeballing things. I'm using a 3D printed 3D printed caliper to take my measurements. I'm not precise at all, but I'm close enough, and it's like good enough for me. But it's I'll be honest, like making the ram air hood vents and making the exhaust pipes, it is a trip. Like I love it. And of course I'm out the cost of the 3D printer. I'm out $300. But once you have the printer, the cost of making the parts is pretty cheap, to be honest. Like a spool of filament usually is around about $20 for a kilo. So that's 1,000 grams of plastic. And then a lot of those parts that I just showed you a minute ago, like the exhaust pipes, the ram air hood vents, those are anywhere from like 10 to 20 grams of filament. So if you do the math, like we're talking, we're talking about like 100 grams of filament would be about $2 worth of plastic. So 50 grams of filament is roughly like $1. So if my part is like 10 to 20 grams of filament, that's like 40 cents. Like 40 cents. So my exhaust pipes on the Slash and the exhaust pipes on the Stampede were in the range of 30 to 50 cents, roughly. Not even that, really. Like, so dirt cheap. Once you get in it, it's pretty cheap to just start creating parts. It doesn't really cost a whole lot. So as far as PLA, like plastics and stuff, what you saw, a lot of the parts I made was a silver PLA. Looks kind of like metallic-ish. But I don't want to ramble too much on this, but I highly recommend it. If you're thinking about getting into 3D printing, do your research, look into the different types of printers. YouTube is stocked full of printer reviews. Like I said with the Bambu A1, I'm very happy with it. I don't have to mess with it, other than when I first pulled it out of the box, it took me 30 minutes to set up. There were 12 screws. 30 minutes later, I had this thing up and running, and I was printing out my first plastic boat. So it's really easy because an app. They've really thought of all the user experience involved in it. And I don't know about you. I don't want to make my hobby 3D printing or like messing with the 3D printer. I just want to print stuff for my RC hobby. So that's it for me. I'll get off my soapbox now, but highly, highly, highly recommend it. If you're thinking about going this route, it's now getting cheaper than ever to get into it. Be on the lookout for sales. Sometimes they have sales on these things, and you get, like I got, for $2.99. I feel like that's a steal for what it is. So that's all I got, guys. These are the parts I got so far. I have like tons and tons of ideas of things that I want to make with this printer. So much so that I even made like a huge list of 3D print ideas just for RC 3D print ideas, like giant list of things. You can use it from everything from like bashers to scale rigs, miniature stuff. Like there's tons and tons of stuff that I want to make with this 3D printer. So and honestly, like if you're subscribed to this channel, you're probably going to see a lot more 3D printed stuff from me now that I'm like knee deep in it. So that's all I got, guys. I know it's a long video, longer than normal. I hope you guys stuck around. I hope you got something out of it. If you did stick around to the very end, hats off to you. I really, really appreciate you for sticking around. And yep, that's all I got. I'll see you on the other video after this. Take care.